And then we'll start the video. So how are you doing tonight? It's good to see you. Thanks for coming. You guys getting ready for Christmas? It's around the corner. Hey, Teresa, thanks for coming today. So we're actually going to dive right into this lecture. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and we're going to move into PowerPoints so we can get going. But is everyone excited for the holiday? Yeah? Does anyone have to work, though? That's the big question. You have to work during Christmas, or do you get it off? You have to work? All right. Can you guys see my slides okay? Well, hopefully you guys have some sort of a break, whether you have to work, but not much. Okay, that's good at least. All right. Well, this is our last week. Like it or not, it is a bittersweet week. We do have 2 assignments, 1 final project that we're going to be working on, and we're going to be talking about a little bit about magazine layout and design today. And I am super stoked about this lesson because, or this, I guess, lecture, because I actually worked in the magazine industry for almost 10 years, and it's by far my favorite thing to do. I love magazine layout and design. It is so fun. And so we're going to talk about the elements of a page so that we can learn how to lay out the article that we are going to be formatting. So let's talk about the assignment real quick. Has anyone had a chance to look at the final project at all? Anybody? You've taken a peek, see what we're doing? And before I dive into week 4, are there any questions about last week? Anything that you guys want to know? This final newsletter design. Or I'm sorry, not final newsletter. This is our final magazine article layout. Oh, Teresa, did you have any questions? You're just saying you looked at it, right? All right, so let me point out real quick. Let me do a quick share and get this up so you can see what we're doing. So here is the final project. It's a multi-page layout. So you're going to be designing a 2-page magazine spread covering the typeface family that you chose to research in week 2. So again, now you're taking your article and you're laying it out in a 2-page spread. In the magazine industry, we call it a double truck. It's just that spread that kind of bleeds over into 2 pages. It's a 2-page article. Yes, absolutely, Donovan. Will do. We're going to talk about the principles behind it, and then you'll get a full demo on exactly what you need to include and all the elements you're going to be graded on, okay? Because there's quite a few things. So I want to encourage you as you're looking at the assessment 4 to pay attention not only to the instructions, but also to the design specs, okay? This is an InDesign layout only, and you're given very specific margins. You're going to be graded on whether or not you did those. Then the article and spread should all include all of these components. You kind of have a checklist that you're going to have to go by. So if I were you, I would check this twice, 3 times before submitting, just to make sure you have these elements. You're going to need a headline, a byline, subheads, body copy, a pull quote, folio. We'll go over all of these and how to implement them on your layout and design. But first, I want to make sure that you see these. Then about 1/3 to 1/2 of your composition should be dedicated to the actual graphic display. There will not be any images or pictures, but this is just going to be designed only using typographic elements. So we're going to use the typography or the letters as art. And so I'll show you how to do that, how to use the space wisely. There are some really good layouts out there and examples that hopefully, even with a simple Google search, you could find some ideas. Also, you're going to be graded on these 9 things: scale, size, width, weight changes, angle, slope, color, use of positive and negative space. None of these should be new to you. We've been covering these in the last 3 weeks, but just if you have any questions, you feel free to ask. Also, I just want you to pay attention that make sure you incorporate these in your layout. So when you completed your article, you're going to export it as a spread in a PDF format, okay? You don't have to submit any other file format. But since this project won't be eligible for revision and resubmission, you may at any time during this process email me a PDF, but you have to do it before Saturday, okay? So if I don't see anything in my inbox on Friday or you send it to me on Saturday, you're not going to get any feedback, okay? Not from me anyways. You can take it to the Student Success Center and they'll be happy to send it to you. So you can send it to me to kind of pre-grade it. Now, the only thing is I've had students send me the final project and say, hey, can you look at this for me? Did I miss anything? What would you change? And I'll go make the changes, or well, I won't make the changes, but I'll suggest changes. And then they'll submit it for their final and they didn't make any changes. So if you're going to get the feedback from me, please implement it, because you'll get doc points for not implementing those changes. Those changes are there to help you improve on your grade. So at least 24 hours for a response. So I need to have them in Friday, probably before office hours are over. So Friday by 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, that's the cutoff. So try to get this into me if you can, if you need help or want feedback, but anyone can do that. The learning coach can help you. The Student Success Center can look at it and give you feedback. So I encourage you to do that. This is the final project. Again, there are no resubmissions on this one. There are no, oh, I missed that. Can I resubmit it? So just make sure that you kind of go down the checklist. Here's the grading rubric. These are the things you'll be graded on. A lot of the same information that's up top. So this is a big assignment. It's also worth 185 points. And I wanted to point out, typically your assignments are only worth 120 points. So this is like adding on, if you had missed a discussion or you missed a 60-point assignment or maybe an assessment that's worth 50 points, this is a great way to get those points back and then some. All right, so this is a big one and you really want to nail this if you can. Also, I wanted to talk about grades. If you haven't done this already, please do so. This is the last week to make changes on your grade by Friday. I cannot make changes after Friday to any past grades, so please take a look at your grades. I had a student email me today and said they had a question about a grade that they received, and it was a good thing because there was an error, there was a glitch in the system, and it had given them a 0 instead of a 120 points. So there very well can be errors, and it's been known to happen. So just you're in charge of your grade, so just check your assignments and make sure you have a grade for everything. If you do not, please email me before Friday so that I can get that fixed. After Friday, unfortunately, I can't make any changes to those past grades. So just wanted to put that out there. But just check them, and I'm happy to help and happy to get those corrected for you if you see anything that needs to be corrected. Now, I will allow resubmissions for past assignments, not late assignments, but if you have received feedback and you want to get a better grade, I will allow that as well. So send those in with by the deadline, and you should be good. Are there any questions about this? I love the Student Success Center too, Donovan. I'm glad you're having positive experience. Some people don't always, but I think that if you use them the way that they should be used, you'll definitely have success. All right. So if there aren't any questions about the assignment right now, we'll go over in more detail. I wanted to talk about this. For some reason, students forget that this is part of a grade. Okay, this is worth 15 points. This is 15 very easy points. It's just basically asking you about what you found of value in the readings, or what did you find of value in the instructor lectures. This is your opportunity to give some feedback. Now, you will be graded on grammar, and I don't want any, I guess, you can't be too relaxed in your responses. Correct spelling, capitalization, those things, and make sure you explain yourself in detail if you had a positive experience or if you had a negative one. Just a one-liner won't really work. We need to have more detail. So just pay attention to that, but please remember to do this. For some reason, students forget or they don't do it. It's such an easy way to get 15 points, okay? So this is almost, I consider this almost like extra credit, and so to speak. So just make sure you take this one. And Donovan, yours is doing the interacting with the live lecture. Yeah, so this is a great way to kind of give some feedback so that the course can improve, the instructor, me, can improve. This is just a great way to find out what did you learn and what did you take from it, and hopefully a lot. Oh, your positive experience. You like interacting with the live lecture. Well, let's see if we can do more of that today, because we're going to be doing some demos and trying to work on our week 4 assignment. I do want to save a lot of time for that because I know there will be a lot of questions. Okay, without further ado, don't forget to do this career integration. This is kind of taking place of your assessment for the week. There is no discussion 4, so there is a reflection, and you're welcome to post in there as well, but that won't be graded. It's just a great way to kind of summarize how your experiences went. So, okay, well, let's move on because we have a lot to cover, and I definitely want to get to the design portion of this assignment. So let's talk about elements of a page. How many of you are familiar with magazine layout and design? Have you guys ever done it before in another class? Or is this kind of new territory? Okay, new for you. All right. Hey, welcome, Sarah. Thanks for coming. This is going to be a great lecture for you guys to attend because we are going to go over exactly what you need and how to do it for the final project. All right. So elements of a page, let's talk about them. Each magazine, what magazines do you guys read? Just type in a magazine that you either have sitting next to you, that you read in the doctor's office, that you have a subscription to. Maybe you read it in the grocery store while you're waiting to check out. People, okay, that's a great magazine. Any others? That's very well known. Parents magazine, okay, if you're a parent, it definitely appeals. Great magazine. Any others? New Times, but that's local. Okay, that's okay. Local magazines definitely count. So what I want you to do is take the magazines that you're familiar with, or next time you pick up a magazine, I want you to look for these elements on a page, okay? This is kind of a silent assignment, but I want you to start noticing how these magazine articles are actually laid out. Or if you see an article that you really like, that's aesthetically pleasing, I want you to look at where the elements are placed on a page and start studying the overall layout of the page. Now, this is a 2-page spread that I have here, and this is called a double track, or we call it the 2-page spread. And it's just 2 pages that are side by side, and I'll show you how to set that up in your InDesign. That you have 2 pages side by side, and elements either are considered separate. If you have a 1-page article, the elements will be separate on each page. But if you have a 2-page article, it's kind of a continuation onto that second page. Usually that second page contains, well, the first page will contain a headline, your byline, and then the beginning of the article. And then the second page usually includes some kind of a graphic, pull quote, other elements like that. So we're going to look at, we're going to look at these elements and talk about them. So each magazine page consists of several crucial elements. This image right here is going to kind of guide you, and we're going to explain, kind of hopefully to have a deeper understanding on how to work with these elements. All right, let's talk about headlines. Can anyone tell me what a headline is? What's a headline? When you hear me refer to headlines, it's the intro. Okay, can you be more specific? Yeah, it's the topic, right? So it's the introduction, like Donovan said, to what the article is going to be like. And as Sarah said, it's the topic of the article, right? It's the main, and sometimes it's the largest element on a page. So the headline, or the header, as you'll hear it referred to, is the largest text on the page. So remember we talked about hierarchy of elements. The larger the element, the more important or prominent it is. So the headline is a very big deal. So I don't want a tiny little headline, you guys, on a 2-page spread. This headline should either be huge on the 1 page or huge on both pages. So it can sometimes extend to both pages. So first and foremost, the most important textual element on a page is the headline. So what am I going to be looking for in assignment 4? I want a very catchy headline. I don't want you to just say Futura or, whatever it is. I want you to pick a short and sweet headline. They're usually 2 or 3 words, or maybe just one line of text that describes what your article is about. Sometimes in very as few words as possible, but I want it to be interesting, whether it's the way you lay it out or the way it's titled. So yeah, you make it expand where it makes you read. Absolutely. So the headline is as important as the layout. Now, after the reader opens the page, the first thing that catches his or her attention is the layout or some dominant image that you see. So not only is the headline going to be an important part of your page, or the most important part, it's also going to take up a lot of room on the page. So save a lot of room for your header, and then also it'll flow into some other dominant sort of imagery or graphic. Let's see. Okay, so then you as the reader might find that the layout's very attractive, but if the headline is not very appealing or interesting, you might skip over that article. So think about the articles that have caught your attention. Is it what it said or how it was laid out, or both? Okay. Headlines can also vary in size, and the importance of the article really determines the headline size. So in this case, I want your headline big. I want your header to be big. So we'll talk about headline treatments at another time, but the positioning of the headline is also vital, and you should aim to place your headlines at the top of the page. Headlines should never be below. They are the first element off a page, very top, okay? This is the place where the eye usually goes first, so there's a reason for it. So many times I've seen headlines placed at the bottom, and for me, this is just bad design. So don't fall into that trap. So not always is it bad, but rarely does it ever work. So good rule of thumb is to place the headline where? Where do you place the headline? At the top. It doesn't have to be in the center, but at the top, okay? The headline should be set in the bigger size regarding other text elements. So on this 2-page spread, what typography or what type element is the largest on these 2 pages? The header, absolutely. So this is what I want to see. I want to see your header to be the largest type element on the page, okay? Nothing should be competing with it in terms of size. All right, let's talk about the intro. Donovan mentioned the intro. Okay, the intro is usually a kicker or a deck. We usually call it a deck or stand first. But as you can see, there's many names for this type of element. I prefer to call it intro, although the most used name is called the kicker. And let me show you what a kicker is. I'll copy this layout over here. If it'll let me do it. Give it a minute. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to move this over. So the kicker is actually, okay, the kicker is right underneath the byline. It's just a little summary paragraph. It's usually bolded or it stands out from all the other elements. It's bigger than your actual body text because the kicker is what kind of draws you in as a reader. It's kind of a summary of what the whole article is about. So you want it to stand apart. So kind of notice how the elements of this page stand out from each other. All right, so from the design point of view, the intro should be set in a bigger type size than the body copy, but in a much smaller size than the headline. They shouldn't be competing with each other. You can also make it a different type style. If you set the headline in a serif type, you can use the sans serif type for an intro. So again, we're talking about contrast. You can also use color as a way to give contrast. This isn't a rule set in stone, but sometimes when you design a large article, headlines can stand all by themselves on a page, and that's fine. They can sometimes work as a team with the image, but this treatment of headline and the main image is also very strong. We don't have an image or graphic, well, I should say picture, but you can use your typography as the graphic images on the page. All right, so I want you to also look at, we'll kind of get rid of this for a minute. There's the columns, okay? This is in a 3-column grid, which means there are 3 columns to each page. And the spacing between each column is the gutter. And I want you to make sure that you have an even gutter set up on your page, okay? I'll show you how to do this, but it's very important that you have even amount of space on your, between your columns. And then the inside margin, the bottom margin, the outside margin right here, these all need to have even amount of spacing, okay, between the body text and the edge of the page. So we want it to be even, so everything looks very consistent and clean. Nothing's muddled or lost. And we don't want type to hang over the edge of the page anyway, so we want to make sure we give a good amount of breathing room there. It does not have to be 3 columns, Donovan. That's a good question. It could be 4. It could be 2. So that's okay, but you do need to have some sort of a column grid. You do need some kind of a grid. So whether it's 2, 3, or 4 on a page, that's fine. You can choose. Great question. So Donovan was just asking, do you have to have 3 columns? It's usually the most common one to start with because it's a very clean way to lay out an article. It's very typical, traditional. So 3 columns is an easy way to go, but you can do whatever you would like. Okay, so let's talk about body copy. Can anyone tell me what body copy is? When we refer to body copy, when you need that in your article. No, you're actually going to use the research paper that you use. You're going to use the words. You can, if you need more text, because a lot of you guys kind of came under the required word length. So those of you who need more content, you can go online and grab more. No filler text though. Use what you've written for your research paper. But if you need more content, then you'll need to grab it from the internet, and that's fine. For this, I'm mainly concerned with balance and the elements of the page. Did they make it on here? I'm not going to be rereading the article. I just want to make sure, does everything look balanced visually? Okay, that's a great question. So if you need more text, go get it online. So if your article is about Futura, go find an article on Futura and you can kind of place it in there. Not all of the article, but if you need more content, you can grab a paragraph or 2. So if yours is on Helvetica, you can do the same, right? Okay, so body copy. Body copy is the main body of the article. It's all the heavy text, all the paragraphs. This is the body copy. It's the smallest, well, it's one of the smallest font size text on your page, but this is the largest part of any article, meaning it takes up a lot of space. Body copy should be as interesting as the design or as the headline or the intro text. What's the point of having a great design and a headline if the content is not very good? It's just kind of no point. So in this case, this doesn't really apply to you because you're not the writer, you're the designer. But no matter how good the design is, if the main body copy is not written in an interesting way, then your magazine kind of loses the readers very slowly. So just make sure that as you're writing your articles, practice trying to engage the reader, because then you'll be designing the article as well, and you really want to make sure you draw the reader in. Yeah, you don't want to be boring. So designing body copy is the first thing that you should do when you're designing the template for the magazine. So here, did you get that? You want to make sure how much space you have. Setting the right margins, the columns, and the size of the body copy really affects its readability and usability. So the size of your body copy should be consistent throughout the entire magazine, or the entire article. If you're using a 12-point Times New Roman font for your body copy on page 1, it needs to be Times New Roman, size 12-point font on page 2, okay? Some of you, when I was grading your assessment I think it was last week, some of you guys had different font sizes within the body copy, and it didn't look very good. And so we need to make sure we stay consistent. Now, you can do treatment on the headers or the subheading. That's fine. Or pull quotes. That's okay. That can be different size. But the actual body text of the article needs to all be consistent. No, Donovan, good question. So Donovan asked, since the paper's about a certain font, so if you're doing Helvetica, does the body copy have to be in that font? Not at all. What I do want to see, but I will say this, your body copy doesn't need to be in that font, but perhaps your headline should. Your header and the elements, the graphical elements on your page should be in that font, absolutely. And I'll show you an example. So let me pull one up that is on, you're doing Helvetica, is that right? Let me pull an app that is in Helvetica. Let's see if I can find it. Nope, this is Avant-Garde, but I'll show you as an example. So this is page 1. This is page 2. But I want you to see how they used the space. So you see their graphical element here? They used the ampersand, and in this case, this was Avant-Garde was the name of their article, but they used the symbols and the characters. You will need the ABC, or the letters and the numbers as part of the elements on your page. So they used it as art. They used the ampersand, excuse me, sorry. They used the ampersand as a visual piece in their article, but it's all in the Avant-Garde font. So the entire body text is not, but the design should be in the font that you chose. Yeah, you need to add the letters. I'll show you other visual examples of how it was done. So here's another one. Let's do this one. This one is Garamond. So I like this headline. I think this is really cool. They just used the name of the font, Garamond, but they styled it really, really cool. And then they have these little, almost like a diagram talking about this is 300 point regular, this is 350 point italic, kind of featuring the style and the font families, or I'm sorry, the font options within the font family. And then they've got their body text down here, but the entire, the body text does not have to be in the font, but the actual design of the letters and the headline definitely should. And then here's another place where they put the characters down here at the bottom. So a lot smaller and less prominent than the article we saw before. I like this one too. It pops out. They use color in a very appropriate way. They did this yellow that really stands out on a black background, and then they highlighted the characters of the font. Now, when you're doing the characters, the A through Z and the 1, 2, 3, or 1 through 0, these, or 0 through 9, I should say, these characters definitely should be in your font of choice, okay? All right, any questions? Those are great questions. I'll show you another one. Here's one called Times New Roman. And this was cool. They used the letters kind of as the art around the box. So they put a white box over their art, and then they put type in between. This was kind of their opening page. So are you kind of getting the idea here? This one had a big headline. Look how big the headline was. Times New Roman. It's huge, right? And then the art was just as prominent, but the body text is very small, which is the way it should be. Okay? All right. Okay, so what we're going to do is continue talking about the other elements that you'll need to know, the pull quote. Have you guys seen the pull quote in your magazines? It's just kind of a bigger quote that gets pulled out of the article. It's usually stylized differently, maybe a different color, definitely a different font size. They're usually larger. Pull quotes are very useful. They break up large bodies of body text. If they're done well, they're an attractive design element, and I really love to play with them a lot. Like, you can do really cool things with them. You can either have them sit in this one column, or they can extend over into 2 columns. You should work with your copy and try to pull out the most interesting parts of the story and emphasize them. So a pull quote is really a neat way to kind of add emphasis and break up big bodies of text. See, this could have been 3 columns of plain boring text, but with the pull quote, it serves as a great tool to break up the big blocks of chunky body text. And it gives a more interesting look to the article. So you can use them in conjunction with the image or the graphics so that they together can tell a story in their own way. The pull-out quotes can be taken out directly from the body text, or they can be summarized excerpts of what the article is about. So design-related, your pull quotes should be set in a big enough size that pulls the reader's attention, just like you see here, and it should not be nearly as big as the headline. So we don't need it to be huge in relation to the headline, but you can emphasize the pull quote with frames or quotations. You can put it in a circle. You can place it inside a big exaggerated quote sign, just like you see here. You can play with them as much as you want, stretch them across a few columns to break up the body over, even more. But this is what a pull quote is. Any questions? All right, not yet. Okay, let's look at subheads. Can anyone tell me what a subhead is? You guys have an idea of what a subhead is? Okay, often you'll hear me refer to your subheads. They are used to break up the body copy and to give some very clever insight into what the reader can expect in the next paragraph. So they're kind of mini headlines. You can see right here, subheading. They're usually bolded, they stand apart, and your subhead set should be just a bit larger than the body copy, sometimes bolded in a different font. And you probably want to avoid placing images or image captions above the subheads. So let's talk about subheads for a minute. Yeah, good job, Donovan. It's an intro to the next part of the topic. Absolutely. And I want to show you an example. So here's one subhead. Let me grab another one. Here's another subhead. All right, so this one was done in italics. This one was set in bold. Now be careful with the italics because they can look pretty light and they don't always stand out. So have you guys seen subheads before? I think you guys used them in the last assessment. Right, okay. So another way that you can make a subhead stand out is if you used all caps, like this. So you can use all caps, or color is a great way to make a subhead stand out. Whatever you do, keep your subheads consistent throughout the article. So if you're going to go all caps, all the subheads need to be same font size, all caps, and bolded. Here's a few other ways you can do a subhead. This is a neat one. It's just, it stands out and breaks up the text. And in a sense, it's kind of a visual element of your page that kind of helps add to the artistic part. Here's another one. This is called a running subhead. And subheads set in a running in style, they look really cool, but the text has to have some meaning. So don't just use it to use it. I really don't prefer not this version, but it's up to you if you feel like it fits. But this subhead right here, the one with the blocky red around it, this subhead was set in a box or it was underlined. So that's kind of a neat way to do it. So there's some subhead examples, okay? When you're setting up subheads, make them consistent throughout the entire article. Don't ever change them or do one way and the other way. There are magazines that want to stand out and be different, and they love to break the rules. But before you break them, you really need to know how to use them. So in this case, we're not going to break the rules with the subheads. You can set your subheads in the same type as your main body copy, but just maybe do a bolder version. Or to make it more distinctive, you could enlarge the subhead a few points or give it a different color. There's a lot of options there. Are there any questions about subheads? Okay, so we're going to practice doing subheads. So if you can pull up your InDesign document, Oh, you know what? Let's watch a video real quick. I want to talk about, let's see if we talked about everything on this page. Okay, your folio is the bottom text here. It's your left running footer or your right running footer. It's the page number usually, or the name of the magazine is usually down here. The year or the date is usually down here. So that's what's usually included in your folio, and you will need to have one, okay? Let's talk about the function of a grid, because this is also important. And I have a video to share with you. So before we get into the design portion, let's watch the video so that we know what we're doing. There is no sound. Let me stop the share.
What is a graphic design?
I want to pause it real quick. Hold on. Yeah, hold on 1 second. Technical difficulties. Okay, there we go.
And grid. A grid you might think of as graph paper or lots of lines on a page dividing things up into small segments. But in graphic design, a grid is basically an organizational system that you use to help organize elements on your page and maintain unity and consistency. There are different kinds of grids and different ways of using them. And here we're going to take a look at a website that shows some of the examples of grids you can use, and also the importance of deciding upon a grid at the beginning of your project and sticking to it as you place your design elements. So here I have a website called designersinsights.com. It's worth a look through to look at the different options that it has, but this page covers, I think, the idea of layout grids in a very simple and easy to understand way. And they mentioned that there are two main kinds of layouts, vertical or landscape. Now, I'd like to expand on that a little bit. Vertical is also known as portrait. So if you see the term portrait, you'll know that it's vertical. And the term landscape also means horizontal. So portrait and landscape, vertical and horizontal. So there are two basic kinds of pages that you work on. If you're working in print, you'll very often be working on vertical pages and layouts. If you're doing work for the screen, such as for websites or other screen-based applications, you'll probably be more concerned with a horizontal layout. So there are different kinds of grids that exist to help you organize your pages. And generally, in graphic design, grids are referred to by the number of columns that they utilize, okay? They're not broken up as much into horizontal rows as they are into vertical columns. So here we have examples of 6 vertical pages using different kinds of grids. The one column grid fills the page with it fills the margins with imagery and graphic elements. 2 columns divides it into 2 columns. Now, these columns don't always have to be the same width. That's something that's good to remember. These examples do show equal width columns, but columns do not have to be equal, as long as there is a certain consistency throughout, say, a multi-page document. If you have one wide column and a narrower one on one page, it would be good to repeat that setup on the subsequent pages, again, for consistency. So we have 2 different versions of the 2-column grid here, and then we have 3 versions of the 3-column grid down here on the bottom row. Now, I recommend, generally speaking, that a 2 or a 3-column grid is the best way to go. It breaks up the space such that you can utilize it in many different ways. It will maintain the best readability for text, and it's really very versatile. Now, here's the idea about a grid. You want to adhere to it with your text and with headlines, with imagery, but then you can break out of it now and then for visual appeal. Look at this example down here, this one. The gray squares, which indicate imagery, they span a couple of columns, and this one goes to the edge of the page. It bleeds off. This one spans 2 columns. the text itself maintains the 3-column grid. So we have a nice balance of 2 and 3-column spanning here with imagery and text. And you'll notice that the headline of this example goes across all 3 of the columns without regard for the columns themselves. So that's breaking out a little bit, but it still all works together. And you'll notice that in all of these cases, with the exception of this bleeding off here and the silhouette of the woman, in every case, the outside margins are honored. Okay, there's a little bit of breakout here, but that's good because this is an image of a skateboarder and it wants to break out a little bit. So the idea of grid use is you adhere to those guidelines with the important pieces, and then you make conscious decisions about when to break out of the grid. So that's the basic idea, and that takes a little bit of practice and experience with laying out pages. But that underlying grid, which of course is invisible once things are printed or published, the underlying grid will help you as you get your skills and get your kind of your chops in order with graphic design. And it will prove to be a really helpful way for you to get comfortable with this concept. The next section here are landscape grids. These are the horizontal pages, and we're doing more of these now with website design and screen-based design. One word here about design for mobile apps. This is becoming much more of a graphic design skill because so many of us are using websites and screen-based apps on our phones. So the layout here isn't quite the same, and there are no examples of real grid use for mobile applications yet, but they're being developed, and they are probably 1-column based and very simple and easy to read because of course the screens are so much smaller. But let's say that we had the luxury of a whole big website screen to work with. The 2-column and the 3-column are very common here as well. We start to see more evidences of 4-column grids because we have such a wide screen to work with. The same principles apply. You honor the grid, but then you break out of it occasionally, maintaining readability at all times, bleeding off the edge when appropriate. One thing I don't recommend is using a 1-column grid, particularly with a landscape screen, because the line length of the text becomes really hard to read. It's too long, it's too much. People do it, but I don't recommend it. It's far better to go with a 2 or a 3-column grid. And again, if you have the information, you can successfully go with a 4-column grid. Again, this will take practice, and you will learn in time which is going to work best for your purposes. Further down on this page, here's a section about, this is specifically for printing. If you're working on a book that's going to be bound, here's a nice looking side view graphic of a perfect bound book. And you'll see that you lose some of your pages in the binding because of the way that it's put together. And this area here is known as the gutter of your page. So when your pages are laid out, you always want to keep in mind that you're going to lose a little bit of your page into the gutter, and you have to adjust your elements accordingly. You don't want to run text beyond the margin. If you want to have a photograph that bleeds across 2 pages, you're going to have to carefully crop it and place it such that it reads correctly when the book is opened. And professional printers know how to work with this. They know how to achieve that effect given their gutter width. So if you ever have to work with professional printers and come across a scenario like this, just be aware of the gutter and work with them to make sure your pieces come out correctly. Down here on this page, we have something that is somewhat related to grids, although not exactly. Really good to study the rule of thirds, which is a way of breaking up imagery into 9 squares or 9 sections and placing your elements of interest not dead center.
Okay, so we're going to stop there. We're running out of time, so we'll come back to do video in just a minute. So the function of a grid, hopefully you saw what it looked like. Donovan saw one that appealed to him. The function of a grid just breaks the space up, and it makes it look more balanced overall. And it establishes a system for kind of arranging the heavy content in a space. So it gives you a place to put things. And grids are about you having control as a designer but keeping things very visually and aesthetically pleasing. So it's just kind of the skeletal structure that melts away. So grids are your friends. Don't be overwhelmed. 2-column landscape. This is Donovan's favorite. Different types of grids. We went over that in the video. The 12-column grid for digital applications. This gives you more flexibility for adaptations. So let's look at this. There's the 12-column grid. And if you break them up in twos, they're divisible by twos. And then you've got the 3. You just kind of see how they're laid out if you chop them up and divide them even more. So let's talk about content, because you have a lot of content to fill. This makes the text flow from letter to letter, word to word, line to line, paragraph to paragraph. So consistency is key. We talked about keeping the same font size, tracking, leading, line spacing, the color of text. All of these things and all of these elements need to be very consistent. So remember, here's just a reminder of the rule that we had last time. Clearly indicate paragraphs, but be careful not to upset the integrity and the visual consistency of the text. The 2 most common ways of indicating paragraphs are indenting or inserting additional space between the paragraphs. So you might see this with the indent here. This is one way to indicate there's a paragraph. But if you're going to use a subheader, do not indent your paragraph. So don't leave space there. It's either one or the other. So if you have a subhead, do you indent it or do you not indent it? So I guess true or false. If you're using a subhead, do you indent your paragraph? No, you do not, right? But if you do not have a subhead, you choose not to go that route, then it's appropriate to indent your paragraph, okay? So just make sure it's kind of one or the other. I know some students used both, and this is the reminder on the rule. We want visual consistency. The 2 most common ways of indicating paragraphs are indenting is by indenting or inserting space between the paragraphs. So also you can give them, you can break up the text that way. It is not frozen. Is it looking like it is? Here, let's see. Is that better? There we go. So let's try this again. So here's a subhead. So the reminder on this rule is that if you have a subhead, you do not indent. We don't indent the paragraph, okay? We leave it like this. But if you do not have a subhead, the rule says go ahead and indent your paragraphs, okay? That's all I was saying. So it's one or the other. Only choose one type of indication to keep the text flowing, okay? So limit drop caps to the beginning of the paragraph only. So if you're going to do a drop cap, make sure that you only do you only do it once in the article, and then after that, you don't do it every paragraph, okay? Just on the first paragraph, the intro paragraph. Pull quotes. So something interesting from the text to catch the reader's attention. We went over this, what it is, so we'll go ahead and skip over it. Just remember to make sure to have plenty of space around the pull quote. We don't want pull quote text running into the body text. Captions. This is important to know, although you're not going to be using captions because you're not inserting photography, but captions are kind of low on the hierarchy scale. They're very tiny. It explains the content of an image or a graphic. And then this is good to know because in magazine design or newspaper design, you will have to label a picture and kind of summarize what's going on in the picture, who took the picture. Usually the photographer's name is under it. But in this case, it's not an element that we're including on our final project. So we'll go ahead and breeze through it real quick. Okay, so the composition is kind of what we're learning about right now. Is just the visual composition and placement of all the elements. So in the visual arts, composition is often used interchangeably with various terms such as design. You might hear form, visual ordering, or maybe formal structure. And so there really is a science to placing elements on a page. And she talked about the rule of thirds. So that was really interesting, but we didn't get into that. But there is a science to putting elements on a page. It's all about balancing and making the reader's eyes not feel totally overwhelmed, but it also directs the reader to what you want them to see next. The headline's the biggest element on the page. That means that's where their eye goes to first. The second largest element on a page is usually the intro, and that's where their eye will go next. So, or perhaps the graphic is the largest, second largest. So you are the designer. You tell me where my eye should lead. All right, so let's talk about design principles, because these are what will be graded on. And we'll kind of run through this real quick, and then we'll open it up to do some design. Let's see if I can get the internet up and running. Give me just a second.
It's always a good idea to
There we go.
review basic design
Can you hear
principles
it?
when you're working with not only typography, but basically anything that you use in graphic design, such as imagery or graphic shapes. In this case, I'm going to focus more on the use of typography as they work with these basic design principles. So I'm going to give you a simple example of each of these 9 principles and how you can think about them when you're working with your text layouts. They are, of course, unity, variety, balance, rhythm, emphasis or focal point, contrast, breathing room, or sometimes called negative or white space, proportion, and scale. The first one I'm going to show is unity. And I have very simple shapes here, and I have some Greeking text to show you examples of how a layout can bring together disparate elements to become unified. And what's working here as far as the layout goes is the way that these elements are aligned. That's what brings these into good unity. Of course, I'm using the same typeface throughout the piece, and that also adds to unity. But I'm pulling these ruler guides down here to show you how different elements are aligned on this piece here. And the most important ones are the 4 margins around the edges. The title and the left side of the paragraph here, and the left side of this gray bar, which could be a photograph or it could be just a basic shape, really serve to bring it together because they're aligned nicely. You can see that there's alignment on the bottom and on the right as well. Now, the darker gray square here the top of it is aligned with the baseline of the word unity, the title, but you could also extend it to the top of this gray, lighter gray square if you wanted to align it with the top of the title. So you do have a little leeway there. But regardless of which you choose, the fact that these are aligned really tightly and nicely serve to give it a good unity and working well together. We can even get away with not having a straight edge on this paragraph. There's a ragged edge here, and that's okay because the outside elements are nicely tightly lined up and serve to work well together. So that is one way you can make unity work in your favor. Variety is another design principle, and these gray squares could indicate paragraphs of text. They could be text or imagery, whatever. But the thing that stands out, of course, is the variety of that red shape in the layout there. Now, that could be text set in a different color. It could be a red bar with, say, white text inside of it to be a variety, give variety to the layout of black text on a white background, for instance. It could also be a nice way to separate this third rectangle on the right from the other 2 on the left. Sometimes you have a separate piece of text which is a different topic and you want to separate it from the others yet still take up the same amount of space. So putting a variety element in there, like a different color or a different font, something to break it up, gives visual interest to the page. And you'll get the hang of how to work with variety the more that you do it. A lot of these things take some time to develop, but the more you practice with them, the easier they will become, and you'll start to see ways to make them happen. Balance is the next principle here. And you'll notice that I have a series of rectangles on this page. Again, they could be text, they could be a combination of text and imagery, but they're illustrated here by the color that I've set these in. The largest rectangle is the lightest color. okay? But it is balanced by the smaller rectangle because the smaller one is a darker color. So even though the larger one is bigger, it still balances nicely because it's lighter, but it balances the smaller one quite well. Then we have the third element of the green repeated squares on top of the rectangle on the right there. And these are much brighter than the others, yet they're the smallest. So because they're brighter, their small size helps keep them in balance. So keep in mind that color and size can work to your benefit when you're trying to balance things. You can have something larger and it can be lighter, and the smaller element can be darker or brighter, and you'll get a good balance that way. And of course, alignment always helps to achieve the unity and also helps with a sense of balance. Rhythm is the next principle. Now, rhythm, here's a secret. The way to get a good sense of rhythm in any element you use, whether it be visual or typographic, is repetition. Repetition is what creates the rhythm. Okay, and I have repetition in each of these two words here. The word sail is repeated 5 times in different colors, different tones, so that it sets up a fairly smooth.
So we'll stop there. All right, and we'll continue to move on with the slides. I just want to hit the certain points that we're going to be needing to know. So are there any questions about the design principles? Or I guess the few that we were able to observe. All right, so they're basic rules, but with every basic rule, there's also things that you need to make sure you include in your design. So stay out of the dead center. Remember, don't center everything. This is kind of a big, this is a big one for a lot of students. They feel like everything needs to be centered on a page. In fact, that's kind of a rookie mistake. So kind of break out of the dead center only rule of thirds. Stay out of corners only. It's very distracting if you're putting things up in corners. This isn't boxing, so we want to make sure we're kind of making sure everything is being distributed evenly. Keep balance. A balanced space between the objects can really make or break your design. And then use cropping for interest. And then fill the space evenly. So we talked about using cropping for interest. What I mean by that is when you're look here, what's a good example? Let me see if I can find one that will fit what I'm trying to talk about. So I guess in this case, this one could work. So they kind of cropped the ampersand so that it fell right in the middle of both pages, the fold of the 2 pages. So it's kind of interesting. Page 1 really looks like this, almost like an 8. And page 2 is the completion of the ampersand. So it's very interesting how they did that. But the cropping of this was an interesting way of approaching it, but I think it works. And then you want to fill the space evenly, obviously. Have a center of interest. We talked about hierarchy. You're going to be graded heavily on hierarchy. How did you place your elements and elements of importance? Use odd numbers rather than even. This can sometimes add some interest to your design. The CRAP, the contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. These are what you're going to be graded on. If you're not familiar with them, please watch the rest of the videos for our week, and then make sure that you create balance. We touched on a few of these. Repetition, she was getting into. Contrast is a big one. Contrast can be done easily. Just look at this example. Black and white is the color scheme, but what element do they use for contrast? What did they use for contrast in this article layout? There's a few things. Anyone? So color is one. Yep, the green, right? The green, that pop of color really contrasts with the black and white background, or the black background and the white text. Even down here where they have the characters listed, the A through Z and the 0 through 9. These characters are in that same, so it's unifying these elements by having that pop of color, but also repeating it again here at the bottom. They're not going crazy with it, but they're just using it tastefully, and it's really working for this layout. It also makes the characters stand out more because nothing else is done in the screen. They're using lowercase, uppercase for contrast. They're using size differences because you can't see in my example here, but one letter is 500 points, this letter is 900 points. So size for contrast, italics for contrast. So they're using quite a few things. You will definitely have to type the letters out, Donovan. Yep, you will have to type out the characters, which is good. You're going to want to do that because the letters themselves, I mean, you're probably going to want to style them differently. Anyways, you wouldn't want a preset thing. You're the designer, so you can do it however you feel would be the most creative, I guess. Repetitiveness, yes. Contrast, emphasis, creative, visual, interesting design. We've been over this. Okay, we're talking about color. Again, here's another black and white piece. I don't want you to think that you have to design a black background with reverse text, because honestly, if we were to get into the nitty-gritty of magazine design, it's actually frowned upon to do a lot of reverse text, the white text on a black background, because it's so hard on the eyes. It strains the eyes a bit. So only do it if, sparingly, if you really need to, but challenge yourself to create a cool design using the white space. You actually read a lot better if it's black text on a white background. But in this case, they're using color again, that yellow, that green, whatever color you can see on your screen. That is the pop of color that they're using. They use it in 3 places. They use it in the headline, the drop cap, and the pull quote. See that pull quote over here? So it's acting almost as an artistic element on their page, just using it sparingly. We talked about repetition, just repeating those similar elements. It could be shapes, colors, fonts, whatever makes a repetitive rhythm. In this case, do you see a repetitive rhythm? What do you see? What's the element that's being repeated here in this article? The circles. Yeah, I guess the sticks and the grass could be in that picture, but in this case, the design element are the circles. Lots of circles, the lines, even the color that they used in the drop cap are being used in the art. So they're pulling the colors from the grass and the sticks. So yeah, good job. The colored circles. We're talking about alignment and balance. Let's look at this example. Symmetrical balance, that's the static stability, the formality, the restful peace that you feel when you look at a layout and everything seems to fit and work. So this is achieved by making all the elements visually equal on all sides. What does that mean? Well, let's look at this example here. This is heavily weighed on the left side because it's got this heavy headline at the top, a subheadline here, and then an intro, a kicker. But because it's so heavily weighed on the left, they're balancing out by the rest of the headline on the right, and then they have a block of text here on the right to kind of add that balance. So different elements, but they're still using it to kind of create that balance on that scale. Thanks, Donovan, for coming. And all right, so we talked about proximity. Let's look at proximity. Elements that are, what relation do they have? If they're split by space, then they're not going to look grouped. If they're close together in proximity, then it's going to look like they're grouped together. So you create that visual focus. So you decide what you want to look like a group or what you want to look separate or individual. So here's an example. Even the columns here, these look like they're supposed to be a group. The pictures are close together. These are supposed to be a group. So this is a way to create an intimate proximity with the elements. All right, there's one more video. We might have to skip the video. Let's see. Let's just do a little bit of the video, and then we will jump into the design portion of the lecture. Let me see if there's anything else we need to know. All the rest we'll be going over. We won't do these. Okay, so one more video, and then we will jump into the design portion. So bear with me for just a second as I pull this up.
Hi again. As you probably know, your final project for this course is a 2-page magazine spread using your typographic report as well as various type elements in the font you've chosen to work with. So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 different websites that will hopefully inspire you and be good sources of reference information as well. This first one is serif.com, and it's a design grid overview. Now, I went over design grids in an earlier video, but this one has a refresher for that, and that's great because you can you never refresh these kinds of pieces of information too much. It's good to review it and have access to it in different places. So this website talks again about grids and specifically how they're used here for magazine layout. And you'll see examples of different page layouts using photographs and headlines and text. They're pretty basic. They're not super exciting. However, they're good because they're basic and they utilize the rules of grid use quite well, I think. Here's a good example of a 2-column grid on a 2-page spread. Notice particularly how the white space above the title adds to some good balance here. So don't be afraid of leaving sections of your pages blank as long as they work with the rest of the layout. And this takes a little practice to know when that can happen, but you just want to play around with it and also look at spreads such as this or other layouts that you find appealing and notice specifically how the white space and negative space is used. Here's an example of fairly uncommon for print, but a horizontal page and how a 2-column grid could be adapted for that. With more and more magazines and publications and basically a lot of communication taking place now on screens, the horizontal page will no doubt become more and more common for layout considerations. So it's good to review nice balanced layouts in the horizontal page. So this site goes through different types of grids. This one shows examples of the 3-column grid, different ways you can treat them in both horizontal and vertical formats. This one here is a 3-fold brochure, horizontal page divided into 3 columns, treated with some good negative space, etc. So there are good examples. Again, they're very simple, but they're basic and easy to understand on this site and helpful for you as you design your own 2-page spread for your project. So this is really a good thing to know about and a good thing to check out. The next website is quite a bit different. It's called magspreads.net, and it's an interview with David Carson, a very well-known graphic designer in the 1990s, and I did mention him in an earlier video about innovative graphic designers. And this is a short interview with him. But what I wanted to share was the images that are on this video. He is the founder and publisher of Raygun Magazine, which again came out in the mid-90s. And at that time, this was very groundbreaking graphic design-wise because he actually is not a classically trained graphic designer, but he went in and founded this magazine and just basically threw out all the rules. And luckily he's talented and creative, and he has a great sense of visual communication. So a lot of the things he did were extremely effective. But you'll notice things like really wonky letter spacing here, the way the letters are, running into one another, bleeding off the page. He's mixing up type styles, and yet it still works in this funky, grungy, deconstruction way that was pretty popular back then. And I actually think this is still quite fresh. I really like the way this stuff works together.
Okay, so we're going to stop here. This would be a good place to take our 10-minute break because we haven't done that yet. When we come back, we'll
the design, and I'll show you exactly what I'm going to be looking for the final project, what to expect, and how to set up your document with your column grid. All right. Thanks, Teresa, for coming. Appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and take our 10-minute break, and when we come back, we'll start the design portion of the demo. Okay? All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into our demo portion of the assignment. Now, I'm going to put a little disclaimer out there. I actually am unable to launch my InDesign for some reason. I'm having some issues with it, so I'm going to have to go and perhaps update it. I think I'm having some updating issues. So I'm doing the tutorial in Illustrator, but please be aware that the assignment is required to be designed in InDesign. So this new document setup will look a little different. With yours, you'll need to give it a name. Final project. It won't ask you the number of artboards, but it will ask you the number of pages. So in this case, you'll select 3. The reason why is because there's always a cover, and then you're going to need the double track to be side by side. So you'll hit number of pages is 3. Okay. The columns, this is where you'll set up your column grid. I like to do a 3-column grid. You can do 2, you can do 4, just whatever works for your design. And then it'll ask you if you want to do this landscaped or vertical. You'll just do orientation, keep the orientation portrait. And then you'll need to set up your margins. And in this case, it doesn't allow me to do that because I'm not in InDesign, but you will set up your margins according to the dimensions that you were given in your final project on the course homepage. So you'll set up your margins, and then we'll go ahead and hit OK. And your document will look a little different than mine. Whoops. Let's try this again. Your document should look a little different than mine. Your document should have 2 pages side by side touching each other. And in this case, my document, this layout will look a lot different because I'm not in the right program. So again, I do apologize. I'm not sure why it's giving me so many issues. I might have to reboot my computer, but I don't want to lose the recording. So we'll go ahead and proceed. I will upload a second video, and you can just fast forward to the very end. It's the demo from the last class that I taught, so you can see how it's done in InDesign. I wanted to show you there are a few design options that we could do. I wanted to show you what other people were doing. Here's an example. Let me pull this up. Here's an example here. This is kind of a neat way how they have the headline or the characters, and they kind of highlight that. They've got the one or I think it looks like a 2-column grid here. That's not so much my favorite as I think what we're going to, here's one on Bedoni. If you did this font, this is kind of a neat layout that you could do like this. And they've got the nice headline, and then they've got the characters, and then they even use the type on a path to kind of create the A through Z letters, the 1, 2, 3, and then some symbols. This is a great way to feature the Bedoni font, and also they use a 2-column grid here, or actually 3-column grid. I'm sorry. So the ascender of this font or this letter here, I'm not sure what it is. I think it might be a D, but this ascender here is kind of lining up perfectly with the edge of these 2 columns, and so this really works. All right, yeah, I really like this one, Sarah. So Sarah, can I ask you, do you have InDesign up? I might have to use your InDesign. Do you have it up? Can you share your screen real quick? I just want to make sure that everyone can set up their InDesign document correctly. Would you share your InDesign screen, and we'll set up the document together? I'll step you through it. Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. You're a lifesaver. All right, awesome. So we're going to go ahead and just pretend to set up a completely new document. If you could go to New, File, New, we'll just start from scratch. Okay, and then do number of pages 3. And then you want to keep selecting pages. You want that box to stay checked. And then you want it to be letter. That's fine. Go to the columns. Maybe just do like a 3-column grid for now. You can create a new document. Did you see as she changed it? Even go to 4. Or see how it automatically will change it for you. Okay, go back to 3. Okay, perfect. That's usually the traditional grid. And then if you look at the gutter space, the default is fine. You will need to adjust the margins though, so let's do that together. Okay, so Sarah, if you will, I'm going to pull up the dimensions so that we can do this together. Give me one sec as it loads. Okay, so for the final project, we need to adjust the margins, and the top should say 0.625. So just type it in 0.625 and type inches right after it, or IN, perfect. And then go to actually you need to uncheck the chain link there. We need to break that link. There we go. Now you can type in 0.625 inches. Perfect. And then tab over to the inside is 0.75 inches. Perfect. Outside is 0.625. And don't forget to put inches at the, yeah, perfect. And then the bottom is 0.875 inches. So as Sarah's doing this for me, she's being my demo, oh, at 0.875. Perfect. And that's all you need to do to set up the document, okay? And hit OK. Perfect. So now your margins is that your purple margin box is that purple box that you see. Your gutters are the space between your columns. So now when you're laying out your text, you want to line up your text box with the column, the purple column lines, okay? All right, perfect. That's how you set up the document. So now we'll go ahead and I'll flip over to my screen. Thank you, Sarah, so much for sharing your screen. Oh, well, actually, real quick, let's do one more thing, Sarah, if you don't mind. If you'll go to your Pages tab that's right next to your Layers tab that's open right now, and you see yeah, perfect. Go to page 2 and 3. That's the spread you're going to be working on. We're not going to be using page 1. We're going to be using 2 and 3. So if you'll double click page 2, perfect. All right, now we'll bring up our spread. So this is how we're going to set up our document. If you will go to your let's see, at the bottom there, if you'll draw a text box, well, this is where we're going to put our folio. At the bottom of your page, we're going to draw a text box and type in the name of the article, maybe the page number. And you know what? We probably need to set this up in our A master. So if you'll double click your A master, right up there, perfect. Double click that left page. Grab your type tool. Thank you, Sarah, for being willing to do this. And then just draw a text box at the bottom. The very bottom, there you go. Perfect. All right, now if you will go to grab your selection tool, your black arrow. And then if you'll hit W for me on your keyboard. All right, it looks like we need to get our smart guides on. Did you have can you go up to the top of view on the drop down menu, and let's do grids and guides. Can you click on grids and guides almost to the bottom? And then, all right, so it looks like you have your smart guides on. Okay, click off. All right, just type in, I don't know, just magazine or the name of your font that you chose, Helvetica. It could be anything, just one word. I'm just going to show you how to set it up. So grab your type tool. There you go. Type in, okay, Gill Sans is the font. And then maybe tab over. Hit tab until you get to the far right. That's good. All right, now if you'll go to type, drop down menu, go to insert special character, the very bottom, last section there, insert special character. Go up some markers, current page number. And this is how you're going to be setting up your page number. Okay, you may need to back up a little bit, or because it looks like, yeah, you tabbed over a little too much. So go back and do it one more time. So delete that. and go to type. This will be a good review. Go to type, insert special character, markers, current page number. Perfect. And you'll see that it puts a letter in there instead of a number because you're on your master. But if you go to page 2 or page 3 or page 100, it will have that number, that page number automatically filled in. So it's really handy tool when you're trying to save time. All right, if you will center that text box so everything's aligned correctly, grab that selection tool and then just kind of move it down at the bottom. We want it at the very bottom, probably about 1/2 inch from the bottom. Yeah, like that. And then just kind of move it over so it's centered onto the page. Just kind of move it over so you have even amount of space on the left as you do on the right margin. You'll just grab your arrow tool, your selection tool. You can do this easily. And then you could even use your arrow key. If you hit the right arrow key about 2 or 3 times, hit the right arrow key. There you go. Keep going until you kind of get it centered on that page. Just you want even amount of space there. Perfect. Good job. So let's do that again. You'll do that again on the right side of the page. Yep, double click, grab your type tool. This time it'll be a little backwards. We'll have the number being on the outside of the page. So, and you know what? You could even copy and paste that box over. So you could do it again, type it again, or you could just copy the box and paste it to save you some time. And you'll need your selection tool for that. Yep, so copy and then paste it. Good, and then kind of place it, line it up so it all locks into place. Perfect, great job. All right, so now you've got your page. Now go to page 2 and 3 if you'll double click. Great, now see how it's put page 2 there and then you've got page 3. Awesome, great job. It won't say 1 and 2 because we have 1 already set up, but in InDesign it always has that cover. So we wanna make sure that the spread is together. So we're doing 2 and 3. Awesome, thank you so much for your help. That was so helpful. All right, now I'll jump into my Illustrator, even though we're supposed to be in InDesign. Again, I apologize for that. Can you see my screen, Sarah? Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure it's all pulled up. Okay, so this was one design idea, but the one I'm going to be doing tonight, let me pull up for you. It's a little simpler than that, and so many windows open, so forgive me, give me 1 second. See if I can pull this up. It's a Helvetica layout. That's pretty simple. And we're just gonna do this. I like this one because it breaks the mold. This is one I saw online that I thought was kind of cool. So we'll make this extend over 2 pages. Let me see if I can scoot this one over. Perfect. Here's my 2-page spread, just like that. All right, so the way that we're gonna achieve this look is we're gonna grab the type tool and I'm going to click and drag. We'll use lowercase. And probably the first thing I'm gonna wanna do is change my font to Helvetica if that is the font I'm going to be using. Okay, and then, sorry, I'm just gonna pick one that works. Okay, perfect. And then I'm gonna do a bold on the letters. And then I'm gonna grab the type tool again. And this is where I'll type the rest of the word Vetica. But in this case, to add some contrast, I'm gonna go back to a regular font and I'm gonna shrink down the size quite a bit. In fact, I might even go to a light font to contrast even more with that dark. Now I do want the font to be, the words to be about the same size. It looks like I've got 130 here. We'll see how much space I have. But in doing this, I'm gonna zoom in and get my headline set up so I can, this is gonna be the art on the page. All right, we'll get it pulled in there. Okay, zoom out. And then what I'm actually, you know what? I'm not able to line it up correctly, so I'm just going to do HE and make this box the L. All right, and then I'm going to rotate Vedica. But before I do, I need to go to Type, Create Outlines. What this does is it now turns the typography or the text into a vector itself. I'm going to make sure that, see that green margin, I'm sorry, that green ruler or that guide, whenever it snaps something into place, it means it's lining it up with something, and that's exactly what we want. So I want the same amount of space between the word and the L as I do the other letters. So I want to keep it very intimate. I don't want it way out here. Okay, it doesn't, I want it part of the word so people kind of get it. I'm going to move it down because I want this I to line up perfectly with the L, the base of the L. So we have straight lines. And then I'm going to need to move this down quite a bit to make room for the numbers. So I'll have this bleed off the page. And then I'm going to type out my numbers. Donovan asked if we had to do that. You actually do have to do that yourself. So I'll need to shrink down the font again. And again, the sizing is all going to depend on how much space you have on your page. Okay, so I'll do 0 through 9. I'll highlight it and I'll go a little bigger if I need. And I'll go to a regular font. And you can mess with spacing later or size later. You can always adjust the tracking to give yourself some space. And notice how I'm keeping the headline nice and large, but I'm making sure that my font is not the star of the show. I'm trying to keep it small. So I'll create outlines again, and then I can rotate it. I'm lining it up. Again, my green ruler guide locks it into place. I don't want the numbers hanging off the page, so I'm going to make them small and kind of extend it as much as it can go without it getting too close to the edge. Thanks, Sarah. I'm sorry for that. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to put the byline here. It's a nice little space I can tuck it in, and the byline just needs to be small. All right, I enlarged the headline. I want a big headline. I want the byline to be small. And then now I can start setting up my columns. In this case, like you saw in Sarah's document, if you're in InDesign, it will already have the column set up for you. Since I have to design in Illustrator and you're not supposed to be doing this assignment in Illustrator, I'm going to be eyeballing the columns myself, but you really should make sure you have your column grid set up like we saw. Okay, so it won't let me, so this is where you'll put your filler text. I'm just going to go grab some text. I'm going to grab an article on Helvetica just for now because I need to place some text. But you have your research paper that you did, so that's good. You can use that. All right, let's throw this in here. Oh, that's not going to work. Let's try it again. Okay, 1 second. All right, here we go. All right, so we've got some text in there. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have even amount of spacing between my columns of text and the margins. Now you see there's more space on this left margin than there is on the right margin, and I want it to be even. So I'm going to make sure that I move them over so they're centered on the page. All right, I'll move them up because guess what? I'll have my folio. We just saw that it was Helvetica. And then she set up the page numbers. I'm only doing this manually for visual purposes, but you should do it correctly the way we demonstrated it in InDesign. And I do apologize that I can't get InDesign to work for some reason. I do need to probably reboot it. Okay, so there's our page number. And now the folio is usually very small. So in fact, it's probably like an 8-point font. And it's usually a different color, like a gray, or you can format this to be like italic. I'm going to lighten the opacity a little bit so it doesn't stand out. So there's my folio. That element of the page is there. Make sure that's centered on the page. Now, my third column runs into my art. How do we make that work? Well, you can do it two ways. You can select this and do a text wrap in InDesign, or you can just have it move down and it start lower. But when you do that, you need to line up the lines of text and make sure that they line up correctly. This one needs to be lined up with I'm lining it up with the A, and I'm also lining it up with this text box as well. Now in InDesign, you want to add a drop cap. So Sarah, do you mind doing a demo for me? Can you share your screen? Will you share your InDesign one more time for me? Okay, if you could draw a text box for me. Give me any text box. There you go. And go to type, fill with placeholder text. So type drop-down menu. And fill with placeholder text. I'm just going to show you, let's see, yeah, at the very bottom, fill with placeholder text. You see that? Perfect. So we'll just put some random stuff in there. So let's add a drop cap. So highlight the first letter of the paragraph. There you go. She's zooming in for us. Okay, and then we'll want to go to, yeah, let's go to character styles. Go to window, your drop-down menu, window. And then go to type in tables. There you go. And then go to character. See if it'll let us do it in there, or we can go to paragraph. It won't let us, so let's go to paragraph. You go to window. type in tables, and then go to paragraph there at the bottom. Perfect. Okay, it does let us do it. It's the bottom left option. Can you increase that one? There we go. So this is just saying how many lines do you want to extend the drop cap? And I would do maybe 2 or 3 lines, but no more than that. So that's how you add a drop cap, okay? It's under your paragraph settings. Also on the left side of the top menu portion of your InDesign is also a paragraph setting that you could click on. It will allow you to, it'll give you those same options. Perfect. And then let's see what else you'll need to know. Let's do a text wrap. Could you draw a circle for me? Over the text, just draw a circle, a small one. Okay, right there. Okay, and then fill it, do like a black or give it a color. You fill it with something. There we go. Okay, so say you have a letter like my Helvetica, the A on my Helvetica was hanging over the text. If you select the object and then go to your text wrap options are right up there at the top. Right there, do you see the circle and square? You'll want the, wrap around the object shape if you click that. And it will give you some spacing. Now you'll have to play around with, how much spacing you want, but you can alter that, and that's how you'll mess around with whether or not you want to wrap something around. So perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. That's so helpful. All right, so we're going to go back here. And we'll add that, we've got that drop cap that that I showed you how to do. So there's the drop cap. Let's see what else. Here's your other columns of text. Now notice how my columns of text end and begin at the same line. They're all flush with each other here at the bottom, okay? Right here, I could draw a line and they're all flush at the bottom. Now this one doesn't seem to match. Down here, I'm going to be looking for this. So you see I'm kind of missing a line of text. It's not lined up. So I'm going to make sure it comes down so it's lined up perfectly with the other lines of text, all right? I want the lines of text to be even. They need to begin and end at the same line. All right, so in this case, on the second page, I'm going to leave a nice amount of white space here above the columns because this is where I'm going to add my other characters. So I'll grab my type box, and this is where I'll do A, B, C, except I don't want italic. We're going to do light. This would be much smaller. Let's do 12-point font. A, B, C, and then I'll just go down the letters. I'm giving a space between each one. Takes a minute. All right, so there it is. After this, Sarah, I'm going to have you do one last demo and we'll call it quits. If you'll bring your InDesign back up, I'm going to show you one thing. Once you create outlines, you can kind of expand it. And this is where I'm going to be placing the characters. I'm going to line them up. See my green lines line up with the flush with the edge of my text box. I'm not going to stretch, just enlarge. And I want this Z to end flush with the right side of my column if I can help it. Let's see if I can get it in. There we go. Perfect. All right. So there's my uppercase. You'll probably need to do another line down here for lowercase. We don't have time for that. Up here, though, is where you could add some other characters, some other artwork, some typography, and you can also do a pull quote. So there's a lot of options that you can do. I'll leave that for your design judgment, but as you can see, this is a great way to lay out an article and create some visual interest here. You could even add color. Like in this case, I could do something with color. And this would be a great way to add some contrast there as well. All right. All right, Sarah, if you'll go ahead and bring yours up, I'm going to close out of mine. Go ahead and show me your InDesign. I'm going to show you how to upload the spread so that the pages are side by side. Sarah's going to be our lovely Vanna White today. If you'll go to File, so pretend we have our 2-page spread. Go to Export. Go to, okay, so it says PDF print here at the bottom. That's great. Now hit Save. And it should bring up a dialog box. Perfect. And you want, just do Range. So you'll click on Range under Pages. And then it should ask you what pages. So do Spreads. Click on Spreads right underneath. And then click on, we don't want all pages. So click the drop-down menu of all pages. Do you see all pages right next to Range? That drop-down menu, it says all pages right next to Range. Yeah, right there. Let's see, I'm wondering if it'll let you enter in. Okay, that's fine. Don't worry about it. It'll probably let us change it at a different place. Okay, so then you can deselect. Perfect. Just make sure that that box is checked Spreads. You see there? Yeah, just like Sarah has it. That's very important to make sure it's selected. Okay, now go to Marks and Bleeds, that next tab. And you want all your printer marks on there so that this is how you'd upload to a printer. Now hit Export. And then, yes, hit OK. And then it will pull up so now your spread, your PDF was created and the spread will be side by side. So that's how you'll do it. There's just that box that you need to check Spread, okay? Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. You've been so helpful. I honestly don't know what I would have done if you weren't here. My InDesign not working. So so hopefully this gives you some ideas of what you can do. I could even show you, since we have a little bit of time, how you can do a pull quote, where you could place it if you were to do this design. You can grab again, it can be just a summary or an actual quote. Let me pull up the box. And you'll pull it in there. Pull quote's a lot larger usually, but not as large as your headline. And it always usually has a quote, or you could do some other thing. You could put it in a box. Or like this. And then you can put it in your article. There you go. Now notice for my paragraph spacing, I'm doing a hard return in between each one. So there's a white space in between each paragraph. You can do it that way, or you can choose to have subheads to divide your paragraphs. That's also an option. So remember, we talked about subheads. We'll need to format our subheads. And the subhead should be different in some way. So I'm going to bold it and maybe use that same red so it stands out. And these subheads can be placed strategically throughout your article to break up the heavy bodies of text. And it will add a lot of color and interest as well. So you can give a summary for a label for each paragraph, basically, if you wanted to keep it consistent. And this will help it look nice and give it something else to look at. All right, and then let's do it one more time. throughout the article. One last place. Perfect. Okay, so there we've got our pull quote. And in this case, you're going to want to turn off the hyphenations because we don't want hyphenated pull quotes. But if you need to make it fit a little bit more in the box, you can kind of shrink it in. But we don't want hyphenated words. Remember, there's a box to select. So it doesn't do that. There's one way to do a pull quote. That's putting it in a box, or you can take the box out. We have all this empty space up here. You could probably put a pull quote right here. Remember, we talked about adding balance. It's very heavy on the left side, so we need something to balance the right side. You could grab a letter. Let's see. Here's the A. Let's do an A. We'll do really light. And then make it really large. Here's something else you could do. It's just enlarge a letter in the font. Like this. And by doing that, you can kind of add some visual interest. I'm lining up this A so it lines up perfectly with the columns. So it kind of falls off the edge a little bit. Kind of hangs into that, or you could even, get creative with it. Remember, less is more, so you don't want to do anything too crazy. But this is another way to kind of highlight your pull quote. You could do the quotes in red. Another way to make it stand out. And usually the pull quotes are a little larger. But in this case, it works. But this is it. So this is the design demo, and that concludes our class. So again, I do apologize. This was done in Illustrator, but remember, just do it in InDesign. I showed you the most important parts, how to set it up in InDesign, thanks to Sarah and her InDesign program. But if you have any questions, email me or reach out to the Student Success Center. You can send me your PDF at any time, and I can review it 24 hours beforehand, before it's due, and you can get some feedback on it. So have some fun with this, work hard, and get it in so you can get all those points. And Sarah, do you have any questions before we end? All right, good luck. Have some fun, get creative, and use Google as some inspiration. There's some great layouts out there. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.